So we are hearing this morning from a mother who ran inside the school in Uvalde, Texas to protect her kids. She says that police held her back and handcuffed her as the shooting unfolded. Lilia Luciano has the exclusive interview. Lilia, good morning.
Good morning to you, Anne Marie, and to Vlad. You know, I met with Angeli Gomez yesterday in a field nearby. She's a farm worker. She was telling me that her kids, on the morning of the shooting, had both graduation ceremonies or a ceremony at school. She showed up there, but she didn't want to take photos with them. She told me she was embarrassed because she had come straight from work. She was working early that morning, and she was dusty from the field, but her kids told her, "Mom, we want to take this photo." She says, you know, "I'm so glad I took that photo because it could have been the last one," and it was for many of the parents who lost their children who had been there. Like many parents, after that, she left, she went back to work, back to the field. And within 10 minutes, she received a frantic call from her mom telling her that there was a shooting at the school. So she got in her car and she sped at about 100 miles an hour, she told me, until she finally got here. And this is what she told me after.
Right away, as I parked, U.S. Marshals started coming toward my car saying that I wasn't allowed to be parked there. And he said, "Well, we're going to have to arrest you because you're being very uncooperative." I said, "Well, you're going to have to arrest me because I'm going in there, and I'm telling you right now, I don't see none of y'all in there. Y'all are standing with snipers, and y'all are far away. If y'all don't go in there, I'm going in there." He immediately put me in cuffs.
She says after Uvalde police officers told marshals to uncuff Gomez, she ran towards the school.
As soon as they uncuffed me, I jumped that first gate fence, and once I jumped it, I went to my son's class, and I knocked on the door, and I remember the teacher saying, I'm like, "Hey, they're already bulge cutting the fence to get me." She's like, "You think we have time to get out?" I said, "Y'all have time. I'm gonna run for my other son."
Once she was assured her son was okay, Gomez ran to get her other child, encountering more officers who tried to stop her.
So I start yelling, and I'm being cooperative, and I'm like, "Well, y'all aren't doing what are y'all doing? Y'all ain't doing y'all need to be in here. Give me your vest. Somebody give me a vest, something." I started paying attention to how far the shots were being, so that I knew the shooter was all the way still by my first son's class. So when I went to my second son's door, the teacher didn't want to open the door for me. So that's when they started escorting me out. And as I see that they're opening my son's door, I go run for my son and I get him.
With both of her kids out safe, Gomez still can't shake the thought of those who didn't make it. While you were inside the school, did you see officers
inside the school? There was not one officer inside the school when I ran to my second son's class. There was not one officer.
And you were hearing gunshots, so you knew
you could hear the gunshots.
Was an active shooter.
It was still active. The gunshots were still active. They were not in there. There was no one in there. If anything, when I pulled up, my car was closer to the school than where the snipers and everybody that was laying on the ground were.
When you heard that it took law enforcement 75 minutes before they went in and stopped the shooter, what was your thinking, having been inside the school yourself?
I don't know. I was just thinking that they could have saved many more lives. They could have gone into that classroom and maybe 2 or 3 would have been gone, but they could have saved the whole class. They could have done something. Gone through the window, sniped them through the window. I mean, something, but nothing was being done. If anything, they were being more aggressive on us parents that were willing to go in there. And like I told one of the officers, "I don't need you to protect me. Get away from me. I don't need your protection. If anything, I need you to go in there with me to go protect my kids." And if anything, they were being more aggressive on us. They were more pertained on keeping us back than getting into that school. You know, her account is another reflection of just the gaps in communication, those holes that we're trying to fill about the information that was coming in from 911, what the officers outside knew, what the officers inside knew. We know that there were officers inside. That's what law enforcement, Texas Department of Public Safety have told us, that there were officers outside of the classroom in a different area, clearly from where she was. But, you know, it's the frustration of the parents trying to get in is something that's understandable, and of course law enforcement can't just let all the parents go in when there's a shooter inside, clearly. But her energy, her frustration is what's reverberating across this community at this point. And she also told me that, you know, she's on probation for some charges from about a decade ago, and that she received a call from someone in law enforcement telling her that if she keeps talking to media, or if she, you know, keeps sharing her story, that she might face some kind of violation for obstruction of justice. So she was holding back from sharing her story until now because a judge told her that she was brave and that
that her probation would be shortened. So that gave her the courage to talk to us. Her uncle's the one who called me and said, you have to hear her story, and I'm so glad he did. And I'm so glad we also met her in the field. She told me, for me, it's important that you come here and you see how hard we work in this heat under the sun. And by the way, there was another parent whose story I'll be sharing later who lost his son and was still there at work under the sun.
Wow.
You know, Lilia, I'm also happy that you were able to file the story with the amount of time that you devoted to sharing Anjali's story, the amount of time that you allowed her narrative to breathe, as we say in the business, to just allow her to express herself, because it is a vivid description of what happened from one parent's perspective on that horrible day. And I just keep going back to what she told you about the police officers who were parked further away than where she was parked, and who ultimately tried to handcuff this mom who was willing to brave whatever, whether she was going to be shot by the shooter or be arrested by police officers. She wanted to go in there and get her children, which is absolutely natural, which just brings into sharp focus the inability, or the inaction, I should say, of the police on the scene.
And we've heard that same sentiment from many parents. She was detained, she told us, by marshals, but the local Uvalde police, who are familiar with her and know her, were the ones to tell the marshals, let her go, we know her, she's a mom in the school. So that's who, you know, got her, I guess, released from the handcuffs. And instead of turning back, she said, all right, this is my chance, and she went in there. It's a call that I think a lot of parents wish that they had had the opportunity to make.
Well, to sort of reiterate what Vlad said, the other thing that you get out of this story is just how sort of disorganized everything was in terms of the police response there, that she was able to run in even after being told not to. And so that, of course, brings us to the police chief, Pete Arredondo, who's been taking a lot of heat about the decisions and choices he made. Initially, we had heard that he had stopped cooperating. Now, you know, his people say, no, he's still cooperating. Do we know what's going on with him?
Yeah, he himself told our Houston affiliate KHOU yesterday that he has in fact been in communication with DPS every day. We've been trying to reach him. We've, you know, shown up to his house. We've shown up to his work. We're trying to get an interview with him. I actually yesterday stopped someone thinking it was him, and it wasn't him. And he's like, no, I'm not Arredondo. We just look alike. Everybody's trying to get answers from him. Of course, you know, he says he's been talking to DPS, but DPS tells us that at least to the Rangers, who are a part of DPS and the ones running the investigation, he hadn't responded to requests for interviews, for follow-up interviews. He did those initial interviews. But today and yesterday, I've also been talking to State Senator Roland Gutierrez. He says, look, we keep hearing Chief Arredondo's name, Chief Arredondo. He just oversaw the school district police. That is a tiny body just overseeing the schools. And yes, clearly he made the wrong call, but it's also unfair to put everything on him when you had so many, you know, you had state law enforcement, you had border law enforcement, you had local city law enforcement. How come none of those agencies said, you know what, no, there's an active shooter, or we're not sure that whether there are still people in there to save, we're just going to go in like the Border Patrol, not Borstar, that's the other one, BORTEC, a tactical team went in there and eventually, you know, shot the shooter. That's a question that Roland Gutierrez, state senator, is asking DPS. He's demanding a report, which he will share with us, and we're also demanding to know exactly who were the officers that were inside the school, where was every agency represented, and understand that, you know, who else could have made that call differently and taken charge.